Special United Nations Ambassador Gerald Senjova. Here is part 10 of the United Nations UN Peacekeeping Operations and an Introduction, my review series. International human rights law, role of host countries. Peace agreements include obligations for the signatories to comply with international human rights treaties and standards. Under normal circumstances, a state fulfills its human rights obligations through the actions of actors, such as parliamentarians, judges, the police, and the armed forces, ministries, and other local authorities. They are responsible for protecting the population and addressing their needs. Actors who may not formally be part of the government or state machinery, but who are acting on behalf of the state, will also have human rights obligations. Under state of emergency, in exceptional circumstances, a state which has ratified a human rights treaty may choose to temporarily suspend some human rights in a time of public emergency which threatens the life of the nation and under very strict conditions. The emergency must be officially declared and made known to the population. The derogation must be strictly required by the exigencies of the situation, and they must not cause discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, language, religion, and social origin. International human rights law and UN peacekeeping. Many multidimensional peace operations are mandated to monitor and promote respect for human rights in their areas of deployment. Building respect for human rights is a fundamental obligation of the United Nations, and peace operations should do everything possible to further that objective. Even without such a mandate, all peacekeepers should be aware of human rights law and its applicability in their daily tasks. Peacekeepers must never do anything in their official or personal conduct that could be a violation of human rights. UN peacekeeping personnel, military, police, and civilians should act in accordance with the international human rights law. They should never become perpetrators of human rights abuses and respect human rights in their dealings with colleagues and with the local people, both in their public and in their private lives. International refugee law guarantees the human rights of refugees and spells out obligations for states to protect refugees living in their territory. The guiding principles of internal displacement identify the rights guarantees relevant to the protection of internally displaced people. Key points associated with the international refugee law. Refugees law defines a refugee as a person who has fled his or her countries and lives in a different country and is unable to return home and enjoy the protection of his or her country because of a well-founded fear of prosecution based on his or her race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a group. In most post-conflict situations, peacekeeping personnel will also be confronted with the internal displacement. Many UN peacekeeping operations are mandated to facilitate the safe return home of refugees and internally displaced people. Treaties and conventions. Other treaties and conventions relevant to peacekeeping operations are 1. Convention on Privileges and Immunities of 1946, Convention on Safety of UN and Associated Personnel of 1994. Then, third, the status of international courts. The Convention on Privileges and Immunities of 1946 is the agreement that provided legal status to the UN and its subsidiary bodies because a peace operation is a subsidiary body of the United Nations. The Convention is applicable to the operation as well. The Convention provides the following privileges to the United Nations. Property and assets are immune from every form of legal process, such requisition, confiscation, expropriation, or any other form of interference. Premises and all premises of UN peacekeeping and all documents are inviolable. The organization is exempt from all direct taxes and custom duties. The organization may hold funds, gold, or currency of any kind and operate accounts in any currency. Official communications are accorded diplomatic privileges and immunities. The Convention provides certain privileges and immunities to the United Nations and is officially for the fulfillment of the organization purpose and to allow its personnel to conduct their official duties without interference. Such provisions provided by the Convention include immunity from legal process in respect of words spoken or written and all acts performed by them in their official capacity, immunity from personnel, arrest or detention, inviolability of all papers and documents, exemption from taxation on the salaries and emoluments paid to them by United Nations. For communications with the UN, the right to use codes and to receive papers or correspondence by courier or in sealed bags, diplomatic immunities and facilities for their personal baggage. Privileges and immunities are granted to official and experts in the interests of the UN and not for personal benefits of the UN or individuals themselves. The Secretary General has the right and the duty to waive the immunity of any official or expert in any case where, in his opinion, the immunity would impede the course of justice and could be waived without prejudice to the interests of the United Nations. Then the convention, the CS of UN staff and associated personnel of 1994 ensures the safety security of personnel premises operations. The convention obligates all signatories to ensure the safety and security of UN and associated people personnel deployed in their territory and to make punishable by national law any violent acts against such personnel. Prohibited acts include murder, kidnapping, or any other violent attack against the personnel, official premises, or private accommodation and the means of transportation of UN and associated personnel. Under the convention, a state party may not attack or hinder UN operations or personnel, must ensure safety of UN personnel and premises, must release detained UN personnel promptly and without interrogation. Pending their release must be treated consistent with the provisions of the Geneva Conventions, must prosecute those who commit crimes against UN and associated personnel. The convention does not apply to a UN operation authorized by the Security Council as an enforcement action under Chapter 7, the Charter of the UN, in which the personnel are engaged, the personnel are engaged as combatants. So that is the Convention on the Safety of UN and Associated Personnel of 1994. When there is personnel involved in the combatants against organized armed forces, and to which the law of international armed conflict applies. In that case, there is an enforcement. So let's go to the statutes of the international courts and the international instruments that have become relevant to peacekeeping. The statute of international courts and tribunals that prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. They include the statute of the International Criminal Court established at The Hague in 1998, and of such specialized tribunals as the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, peace accords. In most post-conflict environments, a peace accord or other agreement such as a ceasefire agreement or agreement on disengagement of forces is likely to be in effect and directly to relate to the peace operation. Key points. The peace accord may be quite detailed, spelling out the various phases of the peace process and the specifics of post and conflict arrangements. The peace accord can be more general, leaving details for future negotiations. The signatories to a peace agreement have a legal obligation to respect the terms of agreement. In certain cases of the UN or key member states have also signed the peace agreements as guarantors who undertake to ensure that the peace of process remains on track. Mission legal documents. Every peacekeeping operation has legal documents. Mission legal documents include Memorandum of Understanding MOU, Status of Forces Agreement SOFA, Status of Mission Agreement SOMA, Mission-Specific Rules, Regulation and Guidance, National Laws, UN, United Nations Internal Rules, Regulations and Guidance. An MOU is a memorandum between the UN and each member states that contribute troops, police, and or funds to the mission. The MOU includes characteristics like specifics of contributions, number and category of personnel, equipment, etc., conditions of service, details of reimbursements from the UN to contributing country, standards of conduct that personnel must observe, disciplinary authority over personnel, especially in cases of serious misconduct, such as cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. On Tuesday, January 22, 2019, that's when I learned obligations of the United Nations, which include reimbursement for contributions, keeping the contributing nations' authorities fully informed of all developments in the area of deployment, providing mission subsistence and other allowances applicable, coordinating the retention of contingents and the transport of their equipment. Obligations for contributing countries include contributions of personnel and equipment must meet agreed standards. All personnel must comply with the UN standards, rules and procedures. Personnel cannot accept or seek instructions from any authority other than the United Nations. The contributing government commits itself to prosecuting to the fullest extent of its own national laws any military personnel who may commit a crime while deployed with the United Nations operation. SOFA and SOMA. The SOFA or SOMA is an agreement between the UN and the host country that outlines the technical details of the proposed peacekeeping operation, SOFA, or peacebuilding mission, SOMA. Note: it's important to keep in mind that SOFA is used in the case of a peacekeeping operation, and the SOMA is used for peacebuilding political missions as they don't have military and police components. SOFA and SOMA features are in SOMA or SOFA is generally not required for peace enforcement operations, as it does not require the concept of the state where an operation is conducted. A model SOFA was adopted by the General Assembly in 1990. Most SOFA or SOMAs are adoptions of that motto. Before a SOMA, SOMA, or a SOFA, SOFA, is formally signed between a host nation and the UN, the model SOFA serves as an interim agreement going into effect as soon as the Security Council established a peace operation. SOFA and SOMA scope: privileges and immunities of UN staff, civilian, police, and military. Safety and security of UN staff. Access to key areas in the country. How rental of premises and procurement and important equipment, provisions and supplies will be carried out. Freedom of movement, passport and visa regulations, recruitment of local personnel, communications in infrastructure and distribution of radio frequencies, claims and disputes, applicability of local laws, status of military and police contingents, SOFA, coordination of rotation of military police contingents, and the transport of the equipment, SOFA, use of weaponry, flags, and uniforms, SOFA. The mission-specific rules, regulations, and guidance reflect the operational context, taking into consideration the safety and security concerns within the mission. MSRRG includes, that is the mission-specific rules, regulations, and guidance. MSRRG includes 1. Concept of operations, 2. Rules of engagement and directives on use of force, then 3. Commanders' directives, and 4. Curfews and personnel laws. MSRRG, mission specific rules, regulations, and guidance concept of operations, also known as the military strategic concept of operation or police concept of operation, articulates the strategic intent for the utilization of military or police capabilities to achieve an overall objective, processes the mission mandate focusing on key areas such as organization and deployment, security, force protection, terms of engagement, serves as a basis for the formulation of lower-level operational plans. MSRRG, ROA, which is rules of engagement, and DUF, which is directives on use of force. The ROA, rules of engagement, are related to the military component, and the directive on the use of force are related to the police component. Where formed police units are authorized to carry arms, features the ROA and DUF provide military guidelines on the use of force in accordance with the Charter and the mandate. ROA and DUF apply specifically to the military and police personnel, provide practical guidance to the commanders, details how and when to use force and the constraints and latitudes in using force and the right of self-defense. Scope. In some instances, contributing nations may have their own national legal restrictions on how and when they can use force. These caveats must be made known to the Department of Peacekeeping Operations and the force commander in order to anticipate operational problems. Mission legal documents. National laws. The mission legal documents specify that all UN personnel are expected to know and uphold the national laws of the host nation. Exceptions to this are usually specifically stated in the SOMA or SOFA documents. Mission legal regiments, UN internal rules, regulations and guidance. The UN internal rules, regulations and guidance apply to all UN secretariat-wide. All UN secretariat-wide rules, policies and procedures related to personnel conduct, rights and obligations. The UN IRR and G include financial rules and regulations, UN policies and procedures, staff rules and regulations, UN code of conduct, Secretary General's bulletins, examples, special measures for protection from sexual exploitation of sexual abuse, reference 93, observance by United Nations Forces of International Humanitarian Law, reference 43, lesson summary. The legal framework of a peace operation legitimizes its activities and guides its personnel in their daily activities. The mandate of the operation, which is authorized by the Security Council, is the basis of all operational tasks. Both national and international law guide peacekeepers in their official functions and personal conduct. Internal United Nations and mission directives and rules provide more detailed operational guidance to United Nations peacekeepers. Lesson 5, we are going to see evolution of peacekeeping. So peacekeeping is a valuable tool in the high demand. Peacekeeping relevance and adaptability is demonstrated in continued high demand. The last decade has seen one of substantial growth in UN peacekeeping operations, with 115,000 peacekeepers deployed in 15 operations across 4 continents. There are now almost 3 times the number of blue helmets as in 2003, and nearly 6 times the number of 15 years ago. The determining factors that have shaped the role of UN peacekeeping are a history of innovation, use of force, a changing threat environment, protection of civilians, partnership with the regional organization, 3 core principles. After this course, we'll also see UN peacekeeping innovations. Innovations in UN peacekeeping. Milestones. From its earliest days, the United Nations has combined military presence in the field to help bring about an end to fighting and sustain peace, while longer-term political solutions to armed conflict are sought. United Nations peacekeeping derives its legitimacy from the United Nations Charter, from Security Council mandate, from its international character, and from some core principles like consent of the parties, impartiality, and non-use of force except in self-defense and in defense of the mandate. Initially grounded in the Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter, peacekeeping operation has developed into an ever more complex and dynamic tool. As early as 1947, military officers supported the efforts of the UN Special Mediator for Palestine, Volker Bernadotte, to bring an end to armed conflict in the Middle East. The first UN observer mission, the UNTSO, was established in 1948. It was not until 1956 that the term peacekeeping was coined with the creation of the UN Emergency Force, UNAFI, deployed in the Sinai Peninsula. In 1956, between Egyptian and Israeli forces, UNEFI, initially composed of armed contingents from um, 10 countries, deployed under the UN flag. That countries, um, it was an armed contingent from 10 countries that was deployed under the UN flag. It was led by Dag Hammarskjöld. To describe peacekeeping, Dag Hammarskjöld was the UN Secretary General by that time. So he's the one actually who described the peacekeeping as belonging to chapter 6.5 of the charter. Chapter 6.5 of the charter. The Security Council later mandated peacekeeping missions with a specific reference to chapter 7, action with respect to threats to the peace, breaches of peace and acts of aggression. In order to address threats posed to peacekeepers themselves and to the people and peace processes, they were deployed to serve. The application of peacekeeping principles evolved in kind, particularly where mission mandates authorized peacekeepers to use all necessary means, up to and including lethal force, to fulfill tasks like protecting civilians from imminent threat of physical violence and preventing spoilers from using violence or the threat of violence to derail peace efforts. On several occasions in recent years, the Security Council has endorsed UN operations in conjunction with the regional peacekeeping efforts, citing Chapter 8 of the Charter. From traditional to multidimensional operations, small missions composed of individual unarmed military observers assembled from different countries to monitor truces and ceasefires in the Middle East, in the South Asian subcontinent, were followed by deployments of armed military contingents to be interpositions between hostile forces, allowing for disengagement and the establishment of agreed buffer zones. Other multidisciplinary peacekeeping models soon emerged. Initially, peacekeeping operations were a response to interstate conflict that threatened international peace and security. The focus later turned into intrastate conflict that threatened regional or global peace. Peacekeeping, which began as a primarily military undertaking intended to keep warring states peacefully apart, developed into a multifaceted civilian-led interest. They often deployed to keep formerly warring parties within a state working peacefully together. Peacekeeping operations resemble one another in many aspects, and in many respects, progress has been made in standardizing forces, headquarters, and in devising mission structures to carry out work in areas such as rule of law and support to national institutions. But there is no standard template for a peacekeeping mission. Mission design has been derived by the Security Council mandate and reflects peacekeeping practice lessons learned from experience and the unique political, security, and operational challenges of each mission. Collective experience acquired by thousands of men and women, uniformed and non-uniformed, through more than 60 operations deployed since 1948, has contributed to the development of practices, procedures, and principles that are reflected in a growing body of guidance and policy. that forms the basis of emerging peacekeeping doctrine. Such doctrine is needed to ensure integration of efforts and interoperability across peacekeeping components. Over time, peacekeeping mandates have incorporated an array of military as well as civilian tasks, covering disciplines as diverse as political and civil affairs, human rights, electoral assistance, rule of law, and public administration. Peacekeeping evolution has not been a linear process in which one kind of mission falls away to be replaced by a new model. Traditional Chapter 6 missions are still deployed along with the complex multidisciplinary missions with robust Chapter 7 mandate and cooperative or hybrid arrangements in line with the Chapter 8 of the Charter. Relatively static. Primarily military monitoring missions such as UNFICYP in Cyprus continue to support ongoing peace efforts, while larger integrated or multi-dimensional missions such as UNMIL in Liberia and UNMISS in South Sudan carry out a range of civilian and military tasks, including helping to building capacity of national institutions in post-conflict states. In 2012, an unarmed military observer mission, UNSMIS, was deployed in an attempt to support a ceasefire plan in Syria, but was later withdrawn when the parties proved unwilling to adhere to the plan and security risks to United Nations observers proved unacceptably high. Mission mandates and models vary considerably. In the Abyei region, the peacekeeping mission combines the role of monitoring a disputed border with a mandate for protection of civilians in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A Force Intervention Brigade, FIB, has been established within MONUSCO, MONUSCO. This brigade, operating under the MONUSCO Force Commander as an integral part of the peacekeeping operation, was formed to respond to persistent armed violence by spoilers that have threatened civilians and peace efforts in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo for more than a decade. In authorizing the Force Intervention Brigade, FIB, the Security Council specified that it was taking these actions on an exceptional basis and without creating a precedent or any prejudice to the agreed principles of peacekeeping, calling for a review of the measure in a year's time. In Mali, MINUSMA has a mandate to deter threats and take active steps to prevent the return of armed elements to population centers, especially in the north of Mali. The mission will operate in some theater as a French force authorized by the Council to take action against similar groups and to intervene in support of MINUSMA. In Darfur, Sudan, UNAMID, the first hybrid force to cooperate as a single mission under African Union and United Nations mandates, continues. In Somalia, Mali, and Central African Republic, the Department of Peacekeeping Operation has assisted in mission planning and in technical advice to African Union counterparts, while the Department of Field Support has been authorized by the African Union and sub-regional organizations. In short, recent years have seen growth and diversification in terms of peacekeeping models and configurations. This reflects the reality that the United Nations peacekeeping remains a flexible tool for collective security and burden sharing among member states. In the next series, we are going to see the use of force and changing threat environment in the United Nations peacekeeping operations. Thank you very much for watching, and keep subscribing, keep sharing, keep watching, keep learning more and more.